This week in a conversation, it's an honor for me to receive from Ontario, Canada, our fantasy author Kim Fedyk. We're going to be talking about her debut novel titled Birthright. But before we get into the video, I just want to remind everyone that it's important to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you do, don't forget to click the notification bell so that way every time a video is posted, it'll go directly into your portable. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardain Isma, and I'm here with impeccable author Kim Fedyk, and we're going to be talking about a very interesting fantasy novel titled Birthright. Kim, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here. I'm glad you invited me on your show.
Okay. So to begin with, but could you please tell the viewers of CSMS Magazine who is Kim Fedyk?
So first of all, I'm a mom. I have a 3-year-old son and I have a 16-year-old stepdaughter. So both of those have their challenges and they're fun. Obviously, I'm a writer and I really enjoy writing.
Okay.
I also love playing baseball, which has now become slow pitch as I've gotten older. And I've actually been playing since I was 3. So I'm not going to give away my age, but that's been a very long time.
I like that.
Yeah.
Great, Kim. Okay. So now we're diving into Birthright. It's a story about a slave named Arlette. And who is on a mission, but the mission is so important and she has to overcome many obstacles. And at times it can be described as revolutionary. So could you please tell us why did you choose such a character? Because at first I thought that Arlette, as a slave, could be an African slave. Is that what we're talking about?
No, so actually, so Arlette actually spent most of her early life in an orphanage. And a series of events happen where she's essentially forced out of the orphanage and she's on her own. And when she's in the orphanage in the beginning of her life, the children are always told not to go out in the forest. There's a forest surrounding the orphanage. They're always told not to go out in the forest. It's dangerous. They're not given a reason. And then when she leaves the orphanage because she's forced out, she discovers that there's slavers in the forest.
Okay.
So then at that point, then she becomes a slave.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not. When I was writing her as a slave, I didn't have any real demographic type ideas in mind of what kind of a slave she would be. It's more like a slave in a fantasy type setting.
Right.
So like they have a leg iron,
Right.
but it's called the grapple. And so it's magic. So she can't get it off herself. And if she kind of tries to get it off, or she tries to break it, or she leaves like the confines of her master's land, then it lights up and it makes this big sign in the air and it says like escape slave, that sort of thing. So it's a completely different kind of thing.
Is it fair to say that the description of the setting, the world that you created for Arlette and her adversaries and all that, could be very well a feudalistic type of society?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. So I would say, yeah, I mean, it could be. So the way that my universe is set up, there's actually 10 worlds. And they're joined together by portals. So in Takara, the one that Arlette starts out in, yes, it has slaves and it has the Lord and that sort of thing.
The knights.
Yeah, exactly. But in another world, for example, in Ahara, which she goes to later, there is no slavery. It's a completely kind of different political system. There's still a king and there's little lords and things like that, but it's a different type of a system. So each world kind of has their own little political structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my next question would be now, because most fantasy authors that I have in these in the show as my guests, they tend to tilt also towards magical realism. Is it the same thing for you too, Ken?
So when you say magical realism, you mean kind of like a story that could take place in a normal setting with just magical elements? Is that kind of what you're going
No,
toward?
if you read writers like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, it's a type of genre in literature. Um, it gives you some sort of a freedom to play things uh, that would have been otherwise hard in the real world. You see what
Oh,
I mean?
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But of course, I know every fantasy has, not every, but most of them, the element of magic is in there. I
Yeah.
don't know if you ever watched the interview that I had a few weeks ago with Deirdre Dunklin. She's a passionate also of magical realism.
Yeah.
She's a great fantasy writer also. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a ton of magical elements in my book. Like I wouldn't say, yeah, I mean the whole structure of the society is based on magic and based on the magical system, but
Mhm.
it's written in such a way that it makes sense. Like it seems to have kind of like a scientific foundation,
Mhm.
so it's kind of more real in that sense, and it kind of brings a type of realism to that idea because you
Mhm.
can think, okay, like this is the way the magic is set up.
Mhm.
You could technically have this happening in a real life kind of situation.
Is Birthright your first fantasy work?
Yeah, so it's my first published book. So yes, my first every type of work.
Okay. So let me ask you this question, Kim. I know a lot of writers, especially fantasy writers, well, my friends, they also have come to develop a passion for historical fiction.
Mhm.
Is it the same thing with you too?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of reading, like I like to read historical fiction. Like the Ken Follett books, I like those books as well.
Uh-huh.
And I majored in history in university, so I
Okay.
definitely have a passion for history.
Okay.
In terms of writing it, I haven't really thought about writing historical fiction yet.
Okay.
I have this series planned out, and then I have another series planned
We're
out
gonna
as
get to that in a second.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, like after I get to those,
Mhm.
then I may kind of go more towards historical fiction because it is definitely something that
Mhm.
I like as well. It kind of calls to me as well.
Because I know you're Canadian, and most Canadian writers tend also to be multi-genre writers. Yeah. I guess maybe it's because the Canadian society in itself is multicultural and
Yeah,
also dual linguistic type of society. I
yeah,
love traveling to Canada myself.
yeah,
Yeah, and the last time I took my children north of the border, and they were amazed because they saw how easily for people in the streets of Montreal to switch back and forth between language so easily.
hmm
You know, they love that. And myself, I'm francophone myself, so
right.
I love both languages, and it's even more so interesting when you can weave between the two languages, so easily. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could do that. I just speak English. We learned French in school. Like in Canada, you learn French in school. But I mean, my French is very
Very
rudimentary,
limited, huh?
very bad. Say colors, numbers.
But at least you know something.
Yeah,
Most Americans don't know.
that's true. But you guys know Spanish, right? I think so. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a bit different, but I Spanish is not foreign to me. Also,
Yeah.
uh, I grew up with people with Hispanic background, and we always also talk a little bit in Spanish. We didn't want the teachers to see what we were talking about.
Yeah, that makes
Kids.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get back to because I know Ken, this is the first book of a series,
hmm
right? So how many books you plan on writing within this series?
So there's going to be three.
Three?
I'm working on book 2 right now, and it's about a third done. And then there's going to be book 3 is going to kind of tie it all together. And I have them all, both of them outlined, so I know where the story's going and I know how it's going to end. I just have to get there.
Okay. So now one question I just have to ask you, because I know when I decided to become a writer, and my siblings, they knew it was always been, and always been my passion.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents somehow, they wanted me to focus more on math and other things. So was that the same for you too?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to write. It's always been kind of what I've been best at school. When I went into university, I started with the maths and the science. Not My parents didn't pressure me; it was my own kind of decision. And then within like the first 2 weeks, I knew that this just wasn't what I wanted.
Okay.
Yeah, so I went into history and psychology.
Okay.
But I still with history and psychology, like there's a ton of essay writing, like everything's just writing and writing, which is what I enjoy doing. So yeah, I knew, yeah.
Okay. So that means in this series, it's going to be 3 books. And after that, you'll probably be thinking of switching from fantasy into just another genre, or will you stick with fantasy?
So after I'm finished this series, I have 3 short stories that are kind of just creepy little odd horror type stories.
Okay.
So I'm thinking I'm gonna write some more of those and maybe make an anthology.
Okay.
But then I've also kind of vaguely planned another fantasy series.
Okay.
And I have a character name, and I have she's going to be an assassin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going after alert.
Yeah, so kind of different.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, this character just kind of came to my mind one night. It was actually pretty recent, a couple of weeks ago. So I think that's going to be my next series.
So let me ask you this, because a lot of fantasy writers, they told me the best time of the day to write seems to be in the early morning hours. Are you an early bird also?
So I used to write my best in the early morning hours. That's exactly right. But then my son was born, and he decided that he liked to wake up at 5.
Okay.
So I wasn't going to wake up at 2.
Okay.
Right. So it's kind of switched to be nighttime. So after he goes to bed, so around 7:30 is at nighttime is now when I write. But I do, if given the opportunity, I would prefer to write during the morning. Yeah.
Okay. Me personally, as a writer, I write, whenever, wherever.
Mm-hmm.
Because I switch between writing and reading, just like when you drink water, switch between juice and water.
Yeah.
Because I love doing both. I'm passionate about reading and writing at the same time. But sometimes I realize that I have to stick to the early morning hours because, Kim, of the simple reason, that's when my wife is still snoring. So,
Yeah.
And then I can write.
Yeah, you have to do it or you're not going to be bothered. Yep. That is true. That's why I write when my son goes to sleep.
Exactly. Okay. Now, do you read to your son?
All the time. He loves books, loves them. We read, my husband and I read to him 2-3 hours a day. It's crazy. He loves books.
And so he's going to grow up to be just like mommy.
Maybe, yeah.
To become like a legacy writer.
Yeah, he could.
Okay,
yeah.
Ken, every time I have a guest in the conversations, at some point we start talking about literature and we switch to something cozier. I know you say since you were very young,
Mm-hmm.
you developed a passion for reading and also writing. If I were to ask you this question, who you would consider as your best writer? It doesn't have to be a Canadian writer.
Mm-hmm.
Who would that person be?
I don't know, best writer. I mean, in terms of the writer that I would say inspired me the most or
Okay.
the fantasy the most, I would say Terry Goodkind.
Okay.
Because he is one of the only writers that I've ever read their books twice. And I read a couple of his books like 3, 4 times, and they're 800, 900 page books. So I would
Okay.
say, yeah. So I mean, from my perspective, I would say that he's definitely the most inspiring writer to me.
Okay.
That I've read.
Okay. So, all right. So, what about cuisine? Since you have a boy, I'm sure you cook for him.
Actually, I don't really cook. My husband is an aspiring chef, so he does most of the
Really?
cooking. Yes.
You're the first, you're the first wife and the conversation will happen to say that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I used to cook, and I enjoy cooking, but yeah, my husband is just like my cooking is here, my husband's cooking is there, so we just do that. But in terms of food that I like, I mean, I'm simple. I like my French fries and my poutine. Very simple, like kid food.
Okay. And now, because I know Canadians love music. So, what is your favorite genre in music?
Oh boy. I honestly haven't really listened to any music that hasn't been like the Wiggles or like some kids' music show ins forever. Like, I don't even know.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I used to like kind of like pop or hip hop, but that was back in like my early 20s. Um, yeah, I don't even really know what I would be that interested in right now. Yeah, I know that's a terrible answer, but yeah, it's kind of the truth.
Okay. Now, my last question, Cam. If there's a lesson that you would want to give to a young person like you, would want to embark upon a journey to teach the world using her pen, just like you,
Hmm.
what lesson would it be, Cam?
It would be to never give up. And it doesn't matter if you write like 100 words a day, you write 1,000 words a day, just keep at it. It doesn't matter if you take breaks from writing, just keep at it. If you have that story in your mind and you have that passion, just keep at it. And don't measure your success or like how much you've written in a day based on what other people do. Just do what works best for you and you'll get there eventually.
Great. So with that, I'm just going to say it's been such a pleasure to have author Kim Fedyk in the conversation.
Thank you.